Welcome back to O'Clock in the Journal. Tonight, we step into a quieter crime. No shattered glass, no forced doors, only diamonds, and the silence they leave behind. A young man comes forward with a simple claim. His fortune has vanished, gone without struggle, gone without witness. But silence can be arranged, and innocence can be rehearsed. In the shadows of polite society, something moves with precision. A design hidden behind courtesy. A triangle drawn in secrecy. Listen closely, because in this affair, the smallest detail cuts the deepest. Chapter 1. I have already recorded many of the adventures of my friend Martin Hewitt, but among them there have been more of a certain few which were discovered to be related together in a very extraordinary manner. And it is to these that I am now at liberty to address myself. There may have been others, cases which gave no indication of their connection with these. Some of them indeed I may have told without a suspicion of their connection with the red triangle. But the first in which that singular accompaniment became apparent was the matter of Samuel's diamonds. The case exhibited many interesting features, and I was very anxious to report it, with perhaps even less delay than I had thought judicious in other cases. But Hewitt restrained me. "No, Brett," he said. "There is more to come of this. This particular case is over, it is true, but there is much behind. I've an idea that I shall see that red triangle again. I may, or of course I may not. But there is deep work going on, very deep work, and whether we see more of it or not, I must keep prepared. I can't afford to throw a single card upon the table, so as many notes as you please, Brett, for future reference, but no publication yet, none of your journalism." Hewitt was right. It was not so long before we heard more of the red triangle, and after that more, though the true connection of some of the cases with the mysterious symbol and the meaning of the symbol itself remained for a time undiscovered. But at last Hewitt was able to unmask the hideous secret and forever put an end to the evil influence that gathered about the sign. And now there remains no reason why the full story should not be told. I have told elsewhere of my first acquaintance with Martin Hewitt, of his pleasant and companionable nature, his ordinary height, his stoutness, his round, smiling face, those characteristics that aided him so well in his business of investigator. So unlike was his appearance and manner to that of the private detective of the ordinary person's imagination. Therefore, I need only remind my readers that my bachelor chambers were, during most of my acquaintance with Hewitt, in the old building near the Strand, in which Hewitt's office stood at the top of the first flight of stairs, where the plain ground glass of the door bore as inscription the single word Hewitt, and the sharp lad Carrot first received visitors in the outer office. Next door to this old house, at the time I am to speak of, a much newer building stood, especially built for letting out in offices. It happened that one day as Hewitt left his office for a late lunch, he became aware of a pallid and agitated Jew who was pervading the front door of this adjoining building. The man exhibited every sign of nervous expectancy, staring this way and that up and down the busy street, and once or twice rushing aimlessly halfway up the inner stairs, and as often returning to the door. Apprehension was plain on his pale face, and he was clearly in a state that blinded his attention to the ordinary matters about him, just as happens when a man is in momentary and nervous expectation of some serious event. Noting these things as he passed, with no more than the observation that was his professional habit, Hewitt proceeded to his lunch. This done with, he returned to his office, perceiving, as he passed the next-door building, that the distracted Jew was no longer visible. It seemed plain that the person or the event he had awaited with such obvious nervousness had arrived and passed. One more of the problems, anxieties, or crises that join and unravel moment by moment in the human anthill of London had perhaps closed for good or ill within the past half-hour. Perhaps it had only begun. A message awaited Hewitt at his office, an urgent message. The housekeeper had come in from next door, Carrot reported, with an urgent request that Mr. Martin Hewitt would go immediately to the offices of Mr. Denson, on the 3rd floor. The housekeeper seemed to know little or nothing of the business, except that a Mr. Samuel was alone in Mr. Denson's office, and had sent the message. With no delay, Hewitt transferred himself to the next-door offices. There the housekeeper, who inhabited a uniform and a glass box opposite the foot of the first flight of stairs, directed Hewitt, with the remark that the gentleman was very impatient and very much upset. "3rd floor, sir. 2nd door on the right. Name Denson on the door. There's no lift." W.F. Denson was the complete name, followed by the line, "Foreign and Commission Agent." This Hewitt read with some little difficulty, for the door was open, and on the threshold stood that same agitated Jew whom Hewitt had seen at the front door. A little less actively perturbed now, he was nevertheless still nervously pale. "Mr. Martin Hewitt?" he cried, while Hewitt was still only at the head of the stairs. "Is it Mr. Martin Hewitt?" Hewitt came quietly along the corridor, using eyes and ears as he came. The Jew was a man of middle height, very obviously Jewish, and with a slight accent that hinted a continental origin. "I have just received your message," Hewitt said, "and as you see, I am here with no delay. Is Mr. Denson in?" "No. Good heavens, no. I would give anything if he was, Mr. Hewitt. Come in, do. I have been robbed. Robbed by Denson himself, without a word of doubt. It is terrible, terrible. 15,000 pounds. It ruins me, Mr. Hewitt. Ruins me. Unless you can recover it. If you recover it, I will pay. Oh, I will pay very well indeed." There was a characteristically sudden moderation of the client's emphasis when he came to the engagement to pay. Hewitt had observed it in other clients, but it did not disturb him. "First," he said, "you must tell me your difficulty. You say you have been robbed of 15,000 pounds. Tiamonts, Mr. Hewitt. Tiamonts. All from the case. Here is the case, empty. Let us be methodical. We will shut the door and sit down." Hewitt pressed his client into a chair and produced his notebook. "It will be better to begin at the beginning. First, I should like to know your name, and a few such particulars as that. Louis Samuel, Hatton Garden, 150, Hatton Garden, Tiamont Merchant." "Yes. And what is your connection with Mr. Denson?" "Business. Just business." Samuel responded. He pronounced it pishness, and it seemed his favorite word. "Like this. I will tell you. I have known him some time, and did at first small pishness. He bought a little Tiamont and half it set in bracelet, and he pay straightforward pishness. Then he bought some very good pay stones, all set in gold, and he pay quite straightforward pishness. At the same time he says, 'I am pishness man myself, Mr. Samuel,' he says, 'and I like to make a little moneys as well as pay out sometimes. Don't you want any little agencies done? I do all foreign commissions, and I can forward and receive and clear at dock and custom house. If you send any Tiamonts, I can consign and insure, very cheapest rates to you, special. If you want brokerage or buy and sell for you confidential, I can do it with lowest commission. Especially I have good connection with America. I have many rich Americans, principals and customers," he says, "and often I could do pishness for you when they come over." By which he meant he might sell them diamonds? Hewitt queried. "Just so, Mr. Hewitt, regular pishness. And after that 2 or 3 little parcels of Tiamonts he bought, for American customers, he says. But he says he can do bigger pishness soon. Aye, so he has. Good heavens, he has. But I tell you, I do also 1 or 2 small pishnesses with him, and that is all right. He treat me very well, and I pay when it suits. Then he says, 'Samuel,' he says, 'very friendly now indeed, Samuel, could you get a nice large lot of Tiamonts for an American customer I expect here soon?' And I say, 'Of course I can. Enough,' he says, 'to fit out a rich man's wife, that is, to pagan. He is not long rich, and he will want more soon. Ah, she will make him pay. But to pagan. A good fit out of Tiamonts, eh? I tell him yes, and I offer usual commission. But no, says Denson, he wants no commission. He will make his own profit. That I don't mind, so long as I get mine. So I agree to put the Tiamonts in at a price. The American, he says, is to come over about a big company deal, and when it is through, he will pay well. So last week I bring a beautiful collection, all cut but unset, and I wait out in that room while Denson shows them to his customer. You mean you let them out of your sight? Yes, that is not so uncommon. Regular pishness. You see, I was out here. This is the only way out. Denson was in the inner office with the Stones and the American. Neither could get out without passing here, and I had done pishness with him already. Well? You see, I wait downstairs with my case, this case, till Denson sends down. He doesn't want me to show fiery natural, you see, in pishness. When I sell to make a profit, perhaps for somebody else, I don't want that somebody to know my customer, else he sells direct and I lose my profit. Fairy natural, see? Of course, I understand. It's a point of business among you gentlemen to keep your own customers to yourselves. And often, no doubt, diamonds pass through several hands before reaching the eventual customer, leaving a profit in each. Always, Mr. Hewitt. Always, you might say. Well, you see, Denson sends down that his customer is in, and I come up. Denson comes out from the inner office, takes my case, and I wait in there. The case which Samuel showed Hewitt was of black leather, perhaps 18 inches long by a foot wide. The arrangement of the office was simple. In this, the outer room, a small space was partitioned off by means of a ground glass screen, and it was in there that Samuel meant that he had waited. Well, he took the case in, and I could hear some sound of talking, but not much, you see, the door being shut. After a time the door opens, and I hear Denson say, "Very well, think over it, but don't be long or you'll lose the chance. Excuse me while I put them back in the safe." Then he shuts the door and brings the case to me and goes back. But of course I stay till I have looked very carefully through all the Tiamonts, in the different compartments of the case, in case one might have dropped on the floor or got changed, you know. That is pishness. Just so. And they were all right? All right, and same as the list. I know well a Tiamont that I have seen once. So I go away. And afterwards Denson tells me that the American liked much the Stones, but wouldn't quite come up to price. That, of course, is very usual pishness. But he will rise, Samuel, Denson says. I know him quite well, and them Tiamonts is as good as sold with a good profit for me. And a good one for you, too, I bet, he says. I was putting the lot to him for 15 £200, and it would have been a nice profit in that for me. And then Denson, he chaffs me, and he says, "Ah, Samuel," he says, "wasn't you afraid my customer and me would hook it out, the window with all your stones?" I don't like that sort o' joke in pishness, you see, but I say, all right, I wasn't afraid that. The window was a mile too high, and besides, I could see it from where I was a-sitting, and so I could, you see, plain enough to see if it was opened. The ground glass partition, in fact, cut off a part of the window of the outer office, which, being at an angle with the inner room, gave a side view of the window that lighted that apartment. Denson laughed at that. Samuel went on. "Ha-ha," says he, "I never thought of that. Then you could see the American's hat hanging up just by the window. Rum hat, ain't it?" And that was quite true, for I had noticed it. A big, gray, wide-awake, almost white. Hewitt nodded approvingly. "You are quite right," he said, "to tell me everything you recollect, even of the most trivial sort. The smallest thing may be very valuable. So you took your diamonds away the first time, last week. What next?" "Well, I came again, just the same, today by appointment. Just the same, I sat in that place. And just the same, Denson took the case into the inner room. He's come to buy this time, I can see." Denson whispers and winks. "But he'll fight hard over the price. We'll see," and off he goes into the other room. Well, I waited, and I waited a long time. I looked out sideways at the window, and there I see the American's big wide-awake hat hanging up just inside the other window, same as last time. So I think they are a long time settling the price, and I wait some more, but it is such a very long time, and I begin to feel uneasy. Of course, I know you cannot sell 15 Touzon wort of Tiamants in 5 minutes. That is not reasonable pishness, but I could hear nothing at all now, not a sound. And the boy that came down to call me up, he wasn't come back. But there I could see the big wide-awake hat still hanging inside the window, and of course, I knew there was only one door out of the inner room, right before me, so it seemed foolish to be uneasy. So I waited longer still. But now it was so late I thought they should have come out to lunch before this, and then I was very uneasy indeed. So I thought I would pretend to be a new caller, and I opened the outer office door and banged it, and walked in very loud and knocked on the boy's table. I thought Denson would come when he heard that, but no, there was not a sound. So I got more uneasy, and I opened the window and leaned out as far as I could to look in at the other window. There I could see nothing but the big hat and the back of a chair and a bit of the room, empty. So I went and banged the outer door again and called out, "Hi, Mr. Denson, you're wanted. Hi, did we hear?" and knocked with my umbrella on the inner door. And, Mr. Hewitt, you might have knocked me down with half a feather when I got no answer at all. Not a sound. I opened the door, Mr. Hewitt, and there was nobody there. Nobody. There was my leather case on the table, open and empty. 15 Touzon pounds in Tiamants, Mr. Hewitt. It ruins me. Hewitt rose and flung wide the inner office door. "This is certainly the only door," he said, "and that is the only window, quite well in view from where you sat. There is the wide-awake hat, still hanging there. See, it is quite new, obviously brought for you to look at, it would seem. The door and the window were not used, and the chimney is impossible. Register grate. But there was one other way, there. The inner wall of each of the rooms was the wall of the corridor into which all the offices opened, and this corridor was lighted, and the offices partly ventilated by a sort of hinged casement or fanlight, close up by the ceiling, oblong, and extending the most of the length of each room. Plainly an active man, not too stout, might mount a chair back and climb very quietly through the opening. "That's the only way," said Hewitt, pointing. "Yes," answered Samuel, nodding and rubbing his knuckles together nervously. "I saw it when it was too late. But who'd have thought, such a thing beforehand? And the American, either there wasn't an American at all, or he got out the same way. But anyway, here I am, and the Tiamants are gone, and there is nothing here but the furniture, not worth £20. Well," Hewitt said, "so far I think I understand, though I may have questions to ask presently. But go on." "Go on? But there is no more, Mr. Hewitt. Quite enough, don't you think?" "There is no more. I am robbed. But when you found the empty room and the case, what did you do? Send for the police?" The Jew's face clouded slightly. "No, Mr. Hewitt," he said. "Not for the police, but for you. Reason plain enough. The police make a great fuss, and they want to arrest the criminal. Quite right. I want to arrest him, and punish him too. Plenty. But most I want the Tiamants back, because if not, it ruins me. If it was to make choice between two things for me, whether to punish Denson or get my Tiamants, then of course I take the Tiamants and let Denson go. I cannot be ruined. But with the police, if it is their choice, they catch the thief first and hold him tight, whether it loses the property or not. The property is only second with them. With me it is first and second and all. So I take no more risks than I can help, Mr. Hewitt. I have sent for you to get first the stones, afterwards the thief if you can, but first my property. You can perhaps find Denson and make him give it up rather than go to prison. That would be better than having him taken and imprisoned, and perhaps the stones put away safe all the time ready for him when he came out. Still, the police can do things that I can't," Hewitt interposed. "Stop people leaving or landing at ports and the like. I think we should see them." Samuel was anxiously emphatic. "No, Mr. Hewitt," he said. "Certainly not the police. There are reasons, No, not the police, Mr. Hewitt. At any rate, not till you have tried. I cannot have the police, just yet. Martin Hewitt shrugged his shoulders. Very well, he said. If those are your instructions, I'll do my best. And so you sent for me at once, as soon as you discovered the loss? Yes, at once. Without telling anybody else? I have told nobody. Did you look about anywhere for Denson? In the street or what not? No. What was the good? He was gone. There was time for him to go miles. Very good. And speaking of time, let me judge how far he may have gone. How long were you kept waiting? 2 hours and a quarter, very near, within 5 minutes. By your watch? Yes. I looked often, to see if it was so long waiting as it seemed. Very good. Do you happen to have a piece of Denson's writing about you? Samuel looked round him. There's nothing about here, he said. But perhaps we can find... Oh, here's a postcard. He took the card from his pocket and gave it to Hewitt. There is nothing else to tell me, then? Queried Hewitt. Are you sure that you have forgotten nothing that has happened since you first arrived? Nothing at all? There was meaning in the emphasis and a sharp look in Hewitt's eyes. No, Mr. Hewitt, Samuel answered hastily. There is nothing else I can tell you. Then I will think it over at once. You had better go back quietly to your office and think it over yourself, in case you have forgotten something. And I need hardly warn you to keep quiet as to what has passed between us, unless you tell the police. I think I shall take the liberty of a glance over Mr. Denson's office, and since his office boy still stays away, I will lend him my clerk for a little. He will keep his eyes open if any callers come, and his ears too. Wait while I fetch him. Chapter 2. It was at this point that my humble part in the case began, for Hewitt hurried first to my rooms. Brett, he exclaimed, are you engaged this afternoon? No, nothing important. Will you do me a small favor? I have a rather interesting case. I want a man watched for an hour or so, and I haven't a soul to do it. Carrot may be known, and I am known. Besides, there is another job for Carrot. Of course, I expressed myself willing to do what I could. Capital, replied Hewitt. Come along. You like these adventures, I know, or I wouldn't have asked you. And you know the dodges in this sort of observation. The man is one Samuel, a Jew, of 150 Hatton Garden, diamond dealer. I'll tell you more afterwards. Carrot and I are going into the offices next door, and I want you to wait there about. Presently I will come downstairs with him, and he will go away. An hour or so will be enough, probably. I followed Hewitt downstairs. He took Carrot with him and locked his office door. I saw them both disappear within the large new building, and I waited near a convenient postal pillar box, prepared to seem very busy with a few old letters from my pocket until my man's back was turned. In a very few minutes Hewitt reappeared, this time with a man, a Jew obviously, whom I remembered having seen already at the door of that office more than an hour before, as I had passed on the way from the bookseller's at the corner. The man walked briskly up the street, and I, on the opposite side, did the same, a little in the rear. He turned the corner and at once slackened his pace and looked about him. He took a peep back along the street he had left, and then hailed a cab. For 100 yards or more I was obliged to trot, till I saw another cab drop its fare just ahead, and managed to secure it and give the cabman instructions to follow the cab in front before it turned a corner. The chase was difficult, for the horse that drew me was a poor one, and half a dozen times I thought I had lost sight of the other cab altogether. But my cabman was better than his animal, and from his high perch he kept the chase in view, turning corners and picking out the cab ahead among a dozen others with surprising certainty. We went across Charing Cross Road by way of Cranbourne Street, past Leicester Square, through Coventry Street, and up the Quadrant and Regent Street. At Oxford Circus, the Jew's cab led us to the left, and along Oxford Street we chased it past Bond Street End. Suddenly my cab pulled up with a jerk, and the driver spoke through the trap door. "That fare's getting down, sir," he said, "at the corner o' Duke Street." I thrust a half-crown up through the hole and sprang out. "Ease crossing the road, sir." the cabman finally reported, and I hurried across the street accordingly. The man I was watching was strikingly Jewish enough, and easy to distinguish in a crowd. I had almost overtaken him before he had gone a dozen yards up the northern end of Duke Street. He walked on into Manchester Square. There a small, neat brougham, with blinds drawn, was being driven slowly round the central garden. I saw Samuel walk hurriedly up to this brougham, which stopped as he approached. He stepped quickly into the carriage and shut the door behind him. The brougham resumed its slow progress, and I loitered, keeping it in view, though the blinds were drawn so close that it was impossible to guess who might be Samuel's companion if he had one. I think I have said that when the Jew came to the office door with Hewitt, I perceived that he was a man I had seen before that day. I was now convinced that I had also seen that same brougham at the same time. But of this presently. The carriage made one slow circuit, and then Samuel got out and shut the door quickly again. I took the precaution of turning my back and letting him overtake and pass me on his way back through Duke Street. At the end of the street he mounted an omnibus going east, and I took another seat in the same vehicle. The rest was uninteresting. He went direct to number 150 Hatton Garden, and there remained. I read his name on the doorpost among a score of others, and after a 20 minutes wait I returned to my rooms. I had no doubt that it was the meeting in the brougham that Hewitt wished reported, and I remembered his rule was never to watch a man a moment after the main object was secured. Hewitt was out, and he did not return till after dusk. Then he came straightway to my rooms. "Well, Brett," he said, "what's the report?" As a matter of fact, Samuel is my client, as I shall explain presently. I don't like spying on a client, as a rule, but I was convinced that he was keeping something back from me, and there was something odd about his whole story. "But what did you see?" I told Hewitt the tale of my pursuit, as I have told it here. "I came away," I concluded, "after it seemed that he was settled in his office for a bit. But there is another thing you should know. When he first came out with you, I recognized him at once as a man I had seen at that same door a little after 2 o'clock, say 1:15. "Yes," answered Hewitt. "I saw him there myself a little sooner. Something like 2, I should say." "What was he doing?" "Well," I replied, "he was doing pretty well what he did in Manchester Square. For as a matter of fact, the brougham also was here then, just outside the next-door office. I think I might swear to that same brougham, though of course I didn't notice it so particularly that first time." Hewitt whistled. "Oh," he said, "tell me about this. Did he get into the brougham this time?" "Yes. He came out of the office door with a black leather case in his hand and a very scared look on his face. And he popped into the brougham, leather case, scared look and all." "Ho, ho," said Hewitt thoughtfully and whistled again. "A black leather case, eh? Come, the plot thickens. And what happened? Did the carriage go off?" "No, I saw nothing more. Shouldn't have noticed so much, in fact, if the whole thing hadn't looked a trifle curious. Nervous, pallid Jew with a black case, as though he thought it was dynamite and might go off at any moment. Closed brougham, blinds drawn. Jew skipped in and banged the door, but brougham didn't move, and I fancied, perhaps only fancied, that I saw a woman's black veil inside, but then I turned in here and saw no more." Hewitt sat thoughtfully silent for a few moments. Then he rose and said, "Come next door, and I'll tell you how we stand. The housekeeper will let us in, and we'll see if you can identify that black case anywhere." It seemed that Hewitt had by this established a good understanding with the housekeeper next door. "Nobody's been, sir," the man said as he admitted us and closed the heavy doors. "Office boy not come back, nor nothing." We went up to Denson's office on the 3rd floor, the door of which the housekeeper opened, and having turned on the electric light, he left us. "Now, is that anything like the case?" Hewitt asked, when the housekeeper was gone, and he lifted from under the table the very black case I had seen Samuel take into the brougham. I said that I felt as sure of the case as of the brougham. And then Hewitt told me the whole tale of Samuel and his loss of £15,000 worth of diamonds, just as it appears earlier in this narrative. "Now see here," said Hewitt when he had made me acquainted with his client's tale. "There is something odd about all this. See this postcard which Samuel gave me. It is from Denson, and it makes this morning's appointment. See? Be down below at 11 sharp is the message. He came, and he waited just 2 hours and a quarter, as he tells me, being certain to the time within 5 minutes. That brings us to 1:15, the time when he finds he is robbed, and he came downstairs in a very agitated state at 1:15, as I have since ascertained. At 2 I pass and see him still dancing distractedly on the front steps, certainly very much like a man who has had a serious misfortune, or expects one. At 2:15, that was about it, I think." I nodded. "At 2:15 you see him, still agitated, diving into the brougham with this black case in his hand. And a little afterward, after all this, mind, he tells me this story of a robbery of diamonds from that very case, and assures me that he sent for me the moment he discovered the loss, that is to say, at 1:15, a positive lie, and has told nobody else. He further assures me that he has told me everything that has happened up to the moment he meets me. Then he goes away, to his office, as he tells me, but you find him posting to Manchester Square in a cab, and there once more plunging into that same mysterious closed brougham. Now why should he do that? He has seen the person in that brougham, presumably, an hour before, and there can be nothing more to communicate, except the result of his interview with me, a thing I warned him to keep to himself. It's odd, isn't it? It is. What can be his motive? I want to know his motive. I object to working for a client who deceives me. Indeed, it's unsafe. I may be making myself an accomplice in some criminal scheme. You observe that he never called for the police, a natural impulse in a robbed man. Indeed, he expressly vetoes all communication with the police. Of course he gave reasons. But the reasons are not good enough. I can't stop a man leaving this country anywhere round the coast except by going to the police. Can it be, I suggested, that Samuel and Denson are working in collusion and have perhaps insured the stones and now want your help to make out a case of loss? Scarcely that, I think, for more than one reason. First, it isn't a risk any insurer would take in the circumstances. Next, the insurer would certainly want to know why the police were not informed at once. But there is more. I have not been idle this while, as you would know. I will tell you some of the things I have ascertained. To begin with, Samuel is known in Hatton Garden only as a dealer on a very small and peddling scale. A dabbler in commissions, in fact, rather than a buyer and seller of diamonds in quantities on his own account. His office is nothing but a desk in a small room he shares with 2 others, small dealers like himself. When I spoke to the people most likely to know of his offering £15,000 worth of diamonds on his own account, they laughed. An investment of £200 or £300 in stones was about his limit, they said. Now that fact offers fresh suggestions, doesn't it? Hewitt looked at me significantly. You mean, I said after a little consideration, that Samuel may have been entrusted with the diamonds to sell by the real owner, and has made all these arrangements with Denson to get the gems for themselves and represent them as stolen? Hewitt nodded thoughtfully. There's that possibility, he said. Though even in that case, the owner would certainly want to know why the police had not been told, and I don't know what satisfactory answer Samuel could make. And more, I find that no such robbery has been reported to any of the principal dealers in Hatton Garden today, and so far as I can ascertain, none of them has entrusted Samuel with anything like so large a quantity of diamonds as he talks of, lately, at any rate. Isn't it possible that the diamonds are purely imaginary, I suggested? Mightn't there be some trick played on that basis? Perhaps a trick on the American customer, if there was one. Hewitt was thoughtful. There are many possibilities, he said, which I must consider. The diamonds may even be stolen property to begin with. That would account for a great deal, though perhaps not all. But the whole thing is so oddly suspicious that unless my client is willing to let me a great deal further into his confidence tomorrow morning, I shall throw up the case. Did you direct any inquiries after Denson? Of course, which brings me to the other things I have ascertained. He has not been here long, a few months. I cannot find that he has been doing any particular business all the time with anybody except Samuel. With him, however, he seems to have been very friendly. The housekeeper speaks of them as being very thick together. The rooms are cheaply furnished, as you see. And here is another thing to consider. The housekeeper vows that he never left his glass box at the foot of the stairs from the time Samuel went upstairs first, to the time when he came down again, vastly agitated, at 1:15, and sent a message. And during all that time, Denson never passed the box. And the main door is the only way out. But wasn't he there at all? Yes, he was there certainly when Samuel came. But note, now. Observe the sequence of things as we know them now. First, there is Denson in his office. I can find nothing of any American visitor, and I am convinced that he is a total fiction, either of Denson's or Samuel and Denson together. Denson is in his office. To him comes Samuel. Neither leaves the place till Samuel comes down at 1:15. I told you he sent some sort of message. The housekeeper tells me that he called a passing commissionaire and gave him something, though whether it was a telegram or a note he did not see, nor does he know the commissionaire, nor his number, though he could easily be found if it became necessary, no doubt. Samuel sends the message and waits on the steps, watching in an agitated manner, as would be natural perhaps, in a man engaged in an anxious and ticklish piece of illegality, for an hour, when this mysterious brougham appears. He takes this black case into the brougham, and he obviously brings it out again, for here it is. Whatever has happened, he brings it out empty. Then he sends the housekeeper for me. When at length I arrive, Denson has certainly gone, but there was an opportunity for that while the housekeeper was absent on the message to my office, after all Samuel's agitation, and after he had carried his case to and from the brougham. The whole thing is odd enough, certainly, and suspicious enough. Have you found anything else? Yes. Denson lives, or lived, in a boarding house in Bloomsbury. He has only been there 2 months, however, and they know practically nothing of him. Today he came home at an unusual time, letting himself in with his latchkey, and went away at once with a bag. But the accounts of the exact time are contradictory. One servant thought it was before 12, and another insisted that it was after 1. He has not been back. And the office boy, can't you get some information out of him? He hasn't been seen since the morning. I expect Denson told him to take a whole holiday. I can't find where he lives at the moment, but no doubt he will turn up tomorrow. Not that I expect to get much from him. But I shan't bother. Unless Mr. Samuel will answer satisfactorily some very plain questions I shall ask, and I don't expect he will, I shall throw up the commission. He called, by the way, not long ago, but I was out. We shall see him in the morning, I expect. A look round Denson's office taught me no more than it had taught Hewitt already. There were 2 small rooms, one inside the other, with ordinary and cheap office furniture. It was quite plain that any man of ordinary activity and size could have got out of the inner room into the corridor by the means which Samuel suggested, through the hinged wall light near the ceiling. Hewitt had meddled with nothing. He would do no more till he was satisfied of the bona fides of his client. Certainly, he would not commit himself to breaking open desks or cupboards. And so, the time for my attendance at the office approaching, I was working on the morning PHNix then, and 10 at night saw my work begin. We shut Denson's office and went away. Chapter 3. In the morning I was awakened by an impatient knocking at my bedroom door. Going to bed at 2 or 3, I was naturally a late riser, and this was about 9. I scrambled sleepily out of bed and turned the key. Hewitt was standing in my sitting room with a newspaper in his hand. "Sorry to break your morning sleep, Brett," he said, "but something interesting has happened in regard to that business you helped me with yesterday, and you may like to know. Crawl back into bed if you like." But I was already in my dressing gown and groping for my clothes. No, come in and tell me," I said. "What is it?" Hewitt sat on the bed. "I'll tell you in due order," he said. "First, I saw Samuel again last night, after you had gone away. You remember, I went back to my office. I had a letter or 2 to write, which I had set aside in the afternoon. while I wrote the letters, shut up, and went downstairs. I opened the outer door, and there was Samuel, in the act of ringing the housekeeper's bell. He said he was very anxious and couldn't sleep without coming to hear if I had made any progress. He had called before, but I was out. I half thought of taking him back to my office, but decided that it wasn't worthwhile, so I walked along to the corner of the Strand till I got him well under the lights. Then I stopped and talked to him. "You ask about the progress in your case, Mr. Samuel," I said. Now, I have sometimes met people who seem to consider me a sort of prophet, seer, or diviner. As a matter of fact, I am nothing but a professional investigator, and even if I were possessed of such an amazing genius as I lay no claim to, I could never succeed in a case, nor even make progress in it, if my client started me with false information, or only told me half the truth. More, when I find that such is the state of affairs, and that if I am to succeed, I must begin by investigating my client before I proceed with his case, I throw that case up on the instant, invariably. Do you understand that? Now I must tell you that I have made no progress with your case. None. For that very reason. He protested, of course, vowed he had told me the simple truth, and so forth. I replied by asking him certain definite questions. First, I asked him whose the diamonds were. He repeated that they were his own. To that I simply replied, "Good evening, Mr. Samuel," and turned away. He came after me beseechingly, and prevaricated. He said something about another party having an interest, but the matter being confidential. To that I responded by asking him with whom he had communicated before sending for me, and who was the person in the brougham which he had twice entered. That flabbergasted him. He said that he couldn't answer those questions without bringing other parties into the matter, to which I answered that it was just those other parties that I meant to know about, if I were to move a step in the matter. At this, he got into a sad state, actually imploring, me not to desert him. He said he should do something desperate, something terrible, that night, if I didn't relieve his mind, and undertake the case. What he meant he'd do, I didn't know, of course, but it didn't move me. I said finally that I would deal only with principles, and that until I had the personal instructions of the actual owner of the diamonds, in addition to a complete explanation of the brougham incident, I should do nothing, and I recommended him to go to the police, and with that I left him. And you got nothing more from him than that? Nothing more, but it was something, you see. He admitted to all intents that the diamonds were not his own. And now see here. I suppose I left him about 10 o'clock. Here is a paragraph in one of this morning's newspapers. It is only in the one paper. The matter seems to have occurred rather late for press. Hewitt gave me the paper in his hand, pointing to the following paragraph. Horrible discovery. A shocking discovery was made just before midnight last night, near the York column, where a police constable found the dead body of a man lying on the stone steps. The body, which was fully clothed in the ordinary dress of a laboring man, bore plain marks of strangulation, and it was evident that a brutal murder had been committed. A singular circumstance was the presence of a curious reddish mark upon the forehead, at first taken for a wound, but soon discovered to be a mark apparently drawn or impressed on the skin. At the time of going to press, no arrest had been made, and so far the affair appears a mystery. Well, I said, this certainly seems curious, especially in the matter of the mark on the forehead. But what has it all to do? To do with Samuel and his diamonds, you mean? I'll tell you, that dead man is Denson. Denson? I exclaimed. Denson? How? I get it from the housekeeper next door. It seems that when the police came to examine the body they found, among other things, money and a watch and the like, a piece of an addressed envelope used to hold a few pins. The pins stuck in and the paper rolled up, you know. There was just enough of it to guess the address by that of the office next door, and it was the only clue they had. So they came along here at once and knocked up the housekeeper. He went with them and instantly recognized Denson, disguised in laborer's clothes, but Denson, he says, unmistakably. And the mark on the forehead? That is very odd. It is an outlined triangle, rather less than an inch along each side. It is quite red, he says, and seems to be done in a greasy, sticky sort of ink or color. Was anything found? The diamonds? No. He says there was money, 2 or 3 5-pound notes, I believe, some small change, a watch, keys, and so forth, but there's not a word of diamonds. I paused in my dressing. Does that mean that the murderer has got them? I asked. Hewitt pursed his lips and shook his head. It may mean that, he said. But does it look altogether like it when 5-pound notes are left? On the other hand, there is the disguise. The only reason that we know of for that would be that he was bolting with the diamonds. But the really puzzling thing is the mark on the forehead. Why that? Of course, the picturesque and romantic thing to suppose is that it is the mark of some criminal club or society. But criminal associations, such as exist, don't do silly things like that. When criminals rob and murder, they don't go leaving their tracks behind them purposely. They leave nothing that could possibly draw attention to them if they can help it. Also, they don't leave 5-pound notes. But I'm off to have a look at that mark. Inspector Plummer is in charge of the case. You remember Plummer, don't you, in the Stanway cameo case, and 2 or 3 others? Well, Plummer is an old friend of mine, and not only am I interested in this matter myself, but now that it becomes a case of murder, I must tell the police all I know, merely as a loyal citizen. I've an idea they will want to ask our friend Mr. Samuel some very serious questions. Will you go now? Yes, I must waste no more time. You get your breakfast and look out for me, or for a message. Hewitt was off to Vine Street, and I devoted myself to my toilet and my breakfast, vastly mystified by this tragic turn in a matter already puzzling enough. It was not a messenger, but Hewitt himself, who came back in less than an hour. Come, he said. Plummer is below, and we are going next door to Denson's office. I have an idea that we may get at something at last. The police are after Samuel Hotfoot. They think he should be made sure of in any case without delay. And I must say they have some reason on the face of it. We joined Plummer at once. I have already spoken of Plummer in my accounts of several of Hewitt's cases in which I met him, and we all turned into the office next door. There we found a very frightened and bewildered office boy, whom Denson had given a holiday yesterday after sending him down to Samuel. He had come to his work as usual, only to meet the housekeeper's tale of the murder of his master and the end of his business prospects. He had little or no information to impart. He had only been employed for a month or 6 weeks, and during that time his work had been practically nothing. Plummer nodded at this information and sniffed comprehensively at the office furniture. I know this sort of stuff, he said. This is the way they fit up long-firm offices and such. This place was taken for the job, that's plain, by one or both of them. The boy's address was taken, and he was given a final holiday and asked to send up the housekeeper as he went out. Plummer passed Hewitt a bunch of keys. The housekeeper entered. Now, Hut, said Martin Hewitt, you were saying yesterday, I think, that the main front door was the only entrance and exit for this building? That's so, sir. The only one as anybody can use, except me. Oh, then there is another then? Well, not exactly to say an entrance, sir. There's a small private door at the back into the court behind, but that's only open to take in coals and such, and I always have the key. This house isn't like yours, sir. You have no back way into the court as we have. It's a convenience sometimes. Ah, I've no doubt. Do you happen to have the key with you? It's on the bunch hanging up in my box, sir. Shall I fetch it? I should like to see it if you will. The housekeeper disappeared, and presently returned with a large bunch of keys. This is the one, Mr. Hewitt, he explained, lifting it from among the rest. Hewitt examined it closely, and then placed beside it one from the bunch Plummer had given him. It seems you're not the only person who ever had a key exactly like that, Hut, he said. See here, this was found in Mr. Denson's pocket. Plummer nodded sagaciously. All in the plant, he said. See? It's brand new, clean as a new pin, and file marks still on it. Take us to this back door, Hut, Hewitt pursued. We'll try this key. Is there a back staircase? There was a small back staircase leading to the coal cellars and only used by servants. Down this we all went, and on a lower landing we stopped before a small door. Hewitt slipped the key in the lock and turned it. The door opened easily, and there before us was the little courtyard which I think I have mentioned in one of my other narratives. The courtyard, with a narrow passage leading into the next street. Martin Hewitt seemed singularly excited. "See there," he said. "That is how Denson left the building without passing the housekeeper's box, and now I'm going to make another shot. See here. This key on Denson's bunch attracted my attention because of its noticeable newness compared with most of the others. Most of the others, I say, because there is one other just as bright. See? This small one. Now, Hutt, do you happen to have a key like that also?" Hutt turned the key over in his hand and glanced from it to his own bunch. "Why, yes, sir," he said presently. "Yes, sir. It's the same as the key of the fire hose cupboards." "Does that key fit them all?" "How many fire hose cupboards are there?" "2 on each floor, sir, 1 at each end, just against the mains. And 1 key fits the lot." "Show us the nearest to this door." A short, narrow passage led to the main ground-floor corridor, where a cupboard lettered "Fire Hose" stood next the main and its fittings. "We have to keep the hose cupboards locked," the housekeeper explained apologetically, "'cause o' mischievous boys in the offices." This key fitted as well as the other. A long coil of brown leather hose hung within, and in a corner lay a piece of chamois leather evidently used for polishing the brass fittings. This Hewitt pulled aside, and there beneath it lay another and cleaner piece of chamois leather, neatly folded and tied round with cord. Hewitt snatched it up. He unfastened the cord. He unrolled the leather, which was sewn into a sort of bag or satchel, and when at last he spread wide the mouth of this satchel, light seemed to spring from out of it, for there lay a glittering heap of brilliants. "What?" cried Plummer, who first got his speech. "Diamonds! Samuel's diamonds!" "Diamonds, at any rate," replied Hewitt, "whether Samuel's or somebody else's. But they can't have been there long. How often is this cupboard opened?" "Every Saturday regular, sir," replied the housekeeper. "Just to dust it out and see things is right." "Now, see here," said Martin Hewitt. "I've had luck in my conjectures as yet, and I'll try again. Here is what I believe has happened. Every word that Samuel told me about the theft of those diamonds was true, except as to their ownership. Denson has planned all along to rob him of as big a collection of diamonds as he could prompt him to get together, and he has played up to this for months. His smaller dealings one way and another were ground bait. Very artfully he let Samuel take the diamonds safely away once, in order that he should be less watchful and less suspicious the second time. This second time he does the trick exactly as we see. He hangs up the imaginary American's hat, he escapes by the fanlight, and he goes out by the back way to avoid the housekeeper's observation. He has arranged beforehand for this, too. He has seized an opportunity when the housekeeper has been out of his box to get wax impressions of these 2 keys, and he has made copies of them. And here we come on a curious thing. It is easy enough to understand why he should foresee and get himself a key for the back door in order to make his escape. But why the key of the hose cupboard? Why, indeed, should he leave the diamonds behind him at all? It is plain that he meant to come back for them, probably at night. He would have been wholly free from observation in that quiet courtyard, and he could let himself in, get the diamonds, and leave again without exciting the smallest alarm or suspicion. But why take all the trouble? Why not stick to the plunder from the beginning? The plain inference is that he feared somebody or something. He feared being stopped and searched, or he feared being waylaid sometime during yesterday. By whom? There's the puzzle, and I can't see the bottom of it, I confess. If I could, perhaps I might know something of last night's murder. As to Samuel's prevarications, there is only one explanation that will fit, now that the rest is made clear. He must have been entrusted with these diamonds by a private owner, for sale, secretly. Some lady of conspicuous position and difficulties, probably, perhaps unknown to her husband. Such things occur every day. A common expedient is to sell the stones and have good paste substituted in the same settings. Samuel would be just the man to carry through a transaction of that sort. That would account for everything. The jewels are en suite, cut but unset, taken from a set of jewelry and paste substituted. Samuel arranges it all for the lady, finds a customer, Denson, who treats him exactly as he has told us. When he realizes the loss, Samuel doesn't know what to do. He mustn't call the police, being bound to secrecy on the lady's behalf. He sends her a hasty message and remains keeping watch by Denson's office. She hurries to him with all possible secrecy, keeping her carriage blinds down. He dashes into the brougham to describe the disaster, taking his case with him in his frantic desire to explain things fully. The lady fears publicity and won't hear of the police. She instructs him to consult me, and consequently, of course, when I recommend communicating with the police, he won't listen to the suggestion. Samuel has arranged with the lady to hurry off and report progress as soon as he has consulted me, and this he does, the lady having appointed Manchester Square for the interview. Perhaps she hints some suspicion of Samuel's honesty, rather natural, perhaps, in the circumstances. That terrifies him more than ever, and leads to his frantic appeals to me when I throw the case up. Come, there's my guess at the facts of the case, and I'll back it with 2 pence, and a bit more. Eh, Plummer? I don't take your bet, answered Plummer. The thing's plain enough, except the murder. There's something deeper there. Hewitt became grave. That's true, he said, and something I can see no way into as yet. But come, you take this parcel of diamonds as representing the law, and here comes one of your men, I think. We had been approaching the front door during this talk, and now a police constable appeared and saluted Plummer. Samuel's just been brought in, sir, he reported. He's half dead with fright, and he's sent a message to Lady H in Peace Square, and he says he wants Mr. Martin Hewitt to come and speak for him. Poor Samuel, Hewitt commented. Come, we'll go and make him happy. Here are the diamonds, and, though safely accounted for, there's no evidence to connect him with the murder. We'll get him out of the mess as soon as possible. And so they did. Hewitt's reading of the case was correct to a tittle, as it turned out, and with very little delay Samuel was released. But with the message from the police station, the fat was in the fire as regarded Lady H. Her husband necessarily became acquainted with everything, and there was serious domestic trouble. Samuel was glad enough to get quit of the business with no worse than a bad fright, as may well be supposed. He showed himself most grateful to Hewitt in after times, giving him excellent confidential advice and information more than once in matters connected with the diamond trade. He is still in business, I believe, in a much larger way, and I have no doubt he is the wiser for his experience, and for the lesson which Hewitt did not forget to rub well in. That it is useless and worse to place a confidential matter in the hands of a man of Hewitt's profession, and at the same time withhold particulars of the case, however unessential they may appear to be. But meantime, on the way to Vine Street, I asked Hewitt what led him to suppose that the new key on Denson's bunch fitted a lock in that particular office building. Call it a lucky guess if you like, Hewitt answered, but as a matter of fact it was prompted by pure common sense. Plummer showed me the things found on the body, and I saw at once that the keys offered the only chance of immediate information. I went through them one by one. There was his latchkey, the key with which he had gone into his lodgings to fetch away the disguise. There was another largish key, equally old, probably the key of his office door. There were other smaller keys, also old, plainly belonging to bags and trunks and drawers and so forth. And then there was the large, perfectly new key. What was that? It was not the key of any bag or drawer, clearly. It was the key of a door with a lever lock. What door? Had Denson some other office? Perhaps he had. But first it was best to begin by trying it on places we were already acquainted with. At once I thought of Denson's disappearance unobserved by the housekeeper. Could this be the key of some private exit from the office building? I resolved to test that conjecture first, and it turned out to be the right one. Being successful so far, of course, I turned to the other new key and tried that, as you saw. But what of that triangular mark on the man's forehead? Martin Hewitt became deeply thoughtful. That, he said, is a matter wholly beyond me at present, as indeed is the whole business of the murder. Whether we shall ever know more I can't guess, but the matter is deep and difficult and dark. As to the mark itself, that seems to have been impressed from an engraved stamp of some sort. It is a plain equilateral triangle in red outline, measuring about an inch on each side. It is in a greasy, sticky sort of red ink, which may be smeared but is very difficult, if not impossible, to rub away. What it means I can't at present conjecture. I have told you my reasons for not thinking it the sign of any gang of criminals. But whose sign is it? Surely not that of some self-constituted punisher of crime. For such a person with no risk to himself could have handed Denson over to the police if he knew of his offense. Can he have been murdered by an accomplice? But he used no accomplice. If one thing is plain in all that story of the stolen diamonds, it is that Denson did the thing wholly by himself. Besides, an accomplice would have taken the keys and have gone and secured the diamonds for himself. Else why the murder at all? But no keys were taken. Nothing was taken, as far as we can tell. And why was the body placed in that conspicuous position? It is pretty certain that the crime cannot have happened where the body was found. Somebody must have heard or seen a struggle in such a place as that. As it is, I should say, the body was probably brought quietly to the spot in a cab or some such conveyance. But mystery envelops this crime everywhere. So far as I can see, there is no clue whatever beyond the red triangle, which, as yet, I cannot understand. The strangling points to the murder being committed by a powerful man, certainly, and it is a form of crime that may have been perpetrated silently. But beyond that I can see nothing. The apparent motivelessness of the thing makes the mystery all the darker, and the circumstances we are acquainted with, instead of helping us, seem to complicate the puzzle. What was it that Denson feared when he left those diamonds behind him, when he might have carried them away? And why should he fear it in daytime and not at night, since it would seem plain that he meant to have returned for the stones at night? Where did he go to disguise himself yesterday? We know it was not in his lodgings. And where has he left the clothes he discarded? All these doubts and mysteries were destined to be cleared up, in more or less degree. But it was not till Hewitt and I had witnessed other singular adventures that the answer came to the problem. The real meaning of the red triangle was made apparent, and its connection with the theft of Samuel's diamonds grew clear. For indeed the connection proved in the end to be very intimate indeed. Once, a little later, we were allowed to see a shade farther into the mystery, as I shall tell in the proper place. But even then, the real secret remained hidden from us till the appointed end. So ended the case of Samuel's diamonds, so far as concerned Samuel himself and the owner. But the case of the red triangle had only begun.